Hey crafty people, it's Tasha. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm sharing a video that I originally shared over on the Wow Embossing page, and I hope that you enjoy it. For this project I'm revisiting some techniques and an embossing powder that I absolutely love. So I have this stamp and stencil set from Hero Arts, some large letter dies, some of their reactive inks in blues and teals, and our frosted glass embossing powder. In my opinion, this powder is so slept on, and I'm going to show you my favourite way to use it. We'll talk more about the embossing powder a little later because we need to create that background first. So I'm starting with stencil number 1 of this 3-part set. I have it on an A2 panel of Nina Solar White £80, and I'm starting with my lightest blue splash all over the image. I want to get a pretty even layer of colour over the whole image, and I'm using some blending brushes to achieve that. Once I'm happy with it, I'm adding some of the darker blue to the base of all of the images just to give me some nice variation of colour. This one is Blue Hawaii. It would be easier to switch out for a smaller detail blending brush here, but I didn't have any close by, so I just stuck with this one. Moving on to stencil 2, and I'm trying to line it up, but realising that there really isn't anywhere that I can use to gauge if I'm in the right place, and if I get it wrong, it won't match up with the stamp. So there are 4 registration marks in the corner of the stencils, but I used a panel that was already cut to size, so they didn't fit onto the panel. So I decided to add a little bit of temporary adhesive to the back of my panel and stick it onto a larger piece of scrap paper. Then I can bring the first stencil back, line it up and ink blend those 4 marks, which will allow me to line up the other 2 stencils easily. So on stencil 2, I'm using that darker Blue Hawaii ink all over. This is actually the darkest shade of blue in the reactive ink line, but I want to deepen the bottom of each section again, so I'm grabbing a deep purple shade instead. This is Amethyst and it's from the Core ink line. I don't want to give my image the look of purple, but I just need to deepen the blue shade. So again, I'm adding it to the bottom of each of the areas on this stencil. Then I'm giving the stencil a quick wipe and coming back in with that Blue Hawaii all over. This is going to deepen the colour all over, and it will take out any purple, so you'd never know that I used that colour once we get to the finished card. On to stencil 3, I added that in place and then blended my lightest teal shade, Pool Party, all over it, before switching to the darkest teal, Blue Raspberry, which I'm dotting round wherever I think best for that extra dimension again. I'm loving that combination of blues and teals that's on this. Now it's time to stamp the outline over the top. So I've got my panel in my mini Misty and I'm lining up the piece of acetate with the image on top of my image. Then I can line up the stamp with that and pick it up with the lid of my Misty. I find that that is much easier to do this way, where you're lining up the stamp with an image of itself. I'm inking up with VersaFine Onyx Black and then double stamping for a really bold outline. Now, I did somehow manage to get it slightly off, just in the upper left hand side. I've got no idea how I did that, but it won't affect my design anyway, and there's no way that I'm going back to do it all again from the start. Now, this panel is cute as it is, but we can make it oh so much more. I'm taking my Root Beer Reactive ink and a domed foam blending tool and adding some distressing to the panel. I'm starting on the edges, blending that colour on so that it's stronger around the outside and fading it in over that folk art image we have. Once I have the intensity of colour that I'm after on the edges, I'm just working on bringing it further in towards the centre. I'm being really light though, because I don't want to obscure the image and the other colours. I just want to add a kind of distressed feel to it. Once I'm happy with that, I like to really deepen the colour on the edges by swiping my ink cube right along them. I also like to add some swiping on the panel itself, but I'm not pressing very hard as I want to get this kind of dry brush effect. We have some interesting colour and visual texture, and now it's time to amp up the actual texture. I want to cover the entire panel with my embossing ink, so I'm using my brayer to both quickly and efficiently apply it all over. Then I'll apply frosted glass across the whole thing. If you've not tried our frosted glass powder yet, then it's definitely one that I highly recommend. It's clear, so it won't obscure anything that you put it on top of, but it is just full of texture, shine and sparkle, so it just enhances everything that it touches. I am running a little low on it because I never just use a little of this stuff. I always end up embossing entire panels, but even then, this little jar has lasted me so well. I'm having to keep scooping some back up to get it to pour over my whole panel. I do actually already have a second jar, as I was worried that I'd run out, so I have that ready as backup, but I knew that I could push this much to do another panel with plenty to spare. I know it always looks like this uses an obscene amount of powder, but honestly, you'd be surprised how far just a little powder can go. Now, with all that texture and sparkle, this is definitely one you have to heat from below. This way, the powder gets all of the heat, but none of the blowing, which would definitely blow some of it away before it's had chance to melt. As soon as you see the powder start to turn clear, move on, or you're going to cause some serious warping. I also like to just go over it quickly from the front once it's melted, just to make sure I didn't miss anywhere. I've left this a few minutes to fully cool down off camera, and now I want to step up this panel just a little more. So I'm taking these large letter dies from Hero Arts, and I'm lining up the H and I on my glass mat to make sure that they're straight, and picking them up with a piece of low tack tape, which I can then use to tape them over to my panel. The tape won't stick to all that texture in the front, so I'm using some more to wrap it round and secure from the back whilst I run through my die cutting machine. Then I can just pop those letters out and carefully remove the dies from my panel. I'm also using the same dies to cut from some double-sided adhesive foam and adding this to the back of my letters. This technique of cutting something from a panel, adding dimension behind it and then putting it back in place is known as eclipse, and it's one of my favourite die cutting techniques. It's really subtle, but it's so beautiful in real life. I'm adhering the panel with cutouts directly onto an A2 side folding card base made from £110 Nina Solar White with some strong double-sided adhesive, and then I can add my eclipse letters back into place exactly as they were. Now, it's not an issue with this design, but if you have little cutouts inside your letters, you need to save them and put them back in place directly on the card, level with the panel, or the effect won't work. Now you can see that front on, the pattern is not disrupted at all, but when angled slightly, you can see that dimension and what it says. I stamped the sentiment in VersaFine Onyx Black and embossed in clear gloss. Then I trimmed it to a sentiment strip, and I'm just using the ink left over on my foam tool to add a little colour on there. I'm also swiping over the edges directly with my ink cube again. That stark white would look really out of place against the distressed panel, so I'm just wanting to knock that white down a little. Now I can add to my card on a thin piece of adhesive foam right underneath my eclipse letters. The last thing to do is embellish with some clear drops. These are from Trinity Stamps and they aren't fully clear because they've got a bit of a shift in them which catches the light, and I thought that it looked really good on that inked panel. Don't forget to use strong liquid adhesive as that texture can be a little tricky. And there we are, my finished, distressed and embossed panel with a hidden eclipse sentiment. Oh, I had a lot of fun with this one. Let me know in the comments which was your favourite technique that I used today. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. We'd love to have you on board. Have a lovely, happy, safe and wonderful week. Stay crafty. Bye.